Keith joins us for this edition of the Shea Anything Podcast. Lots to discuss with Pete Alonso, both what he's doing on the field and what he's saying off of it. We'll discuss that, plus what to do with David Peterson and much, much more. It's all coming up on this episode of the Shea Anything Podcast that starts right now. A reminder, everybody, to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. And the Shea Anything is brought to you by Verizon. It's 5G built right for the Mets, from the network more people rely on. So Doug Williams and Keith Hernandez with you on this episode of the Shea Anything Podcast. And Keith, we want to start with the three-batter rule. And Jeff called this the Pete, and Peterson edition, which I thought was very creative. First, we're talking Pete on the field. Now, he has, since he came back,
do you hear the jackhammering?
I can't hear the jackhammering, actually.
Okay, they're like the apartment, the condo below me. They just sold it, and the new people have been jackhammering for 2 days down below. So forgive the noise. I honestly cannot hear it.
We sometimes get notes from our viewers that your cell phone dings, but I don't think we're going to hear from anybody about the jackhammering. But Pete, Keith. I don't know how closely you've been watching these last few games, but it really seems like since his return to the lineup, you know, he's changed the dynamic, and at least he looks like the version of himself from his rookie year.
Well, no question. I said in spring I said last year, I believe in a sophomore jinx, and it was a shortened season to boot. You don't know if he would have rallied himself or just had a bad year. We'll never know. But what I saw in spring training, and I said from the beginning, I said, Pete's going to be fine this year, and if he stays healthy. And he looks good. I mean, all of his home runs that he's been looking have been on breaking balls. I mean, the pitchers can just continue to be the stupidest players on the planet. And he just is up there. He's going up the middle, and he has become just a really, really good breaking ball hitter.
Now I think I hear some sporadic hammering. It's always a mixture of hammering and jackhammering. It's like they're trying to make the most noise they possibly can.
Yep.
And sometimes it shakes your apartment. I mean, I'm very used to it, having lived in New York for a long time. Okay, so we got the, Pete doing things well at the plate segment over with. I'm more anxious to talk to you about what he said yesterday. So not only was he asked, do you think Major League Baseball should take away these substances from the pitchers? To which he said, no. He said, whatever they need to grip the baseball so they don't hit me in the head, I'm paraphrasing, they should be able to use. I use pine tar, whatever. But then he went on to say what is really a conspiracy theory, that Major League Baseball in off seasons decides to change the baseball depending on the free agent class of the next season. Now, Major League Baseball has said, Rob Manfred admitted this past offseason, we are changing the baseball. That was the first glimpse officially that we got. We've always kind of known what they did in 2019. Now we knew that this year they were deadening the baseball a bit. What I'm not sure anyone knew or even thought of was that it had to do with a free agent class. We'll talk about the substances thing in a second, Keith, but what did you think about what Pete said?
Well, number one, my first thought was, who's got Pete's ear? So whoever's got Pete's ear should shut up and let Pete play. Some things best left unsaid. Hopefully this will just die out. So, but we've all known, we've known, and you just said since 19, that Major League Baseball has never admitted to altering the baseball. They make the baseball. They make the requirements, how they make them. And they've been altered for forever. And when Rawlings was involved, I don't know if Rawlings still makes the balls. I don't believe so. Ted Sizemore was a vice president for years, and he would just giggle and say, no, we don't do it. He would never admit it. Manfred came out. He opened the whole can of worms by saying, we're going to change the ball. So there was loose lip right there. And the first admission really in my career, both in baseball, period, my professionally, that was admitted by management that they were going to alter the ball. So
I liked that Manfred said, we're going to deaden it, which implies that it was juiced. Like it kind of told us everything we needed to know. But anyway, so how does a player, not only did he say that's what he believes, he called it a fact. Is that, I mean, you know how players think and how they communicate with each other in clubhouses. Pete doesn't say that as emphatically as he did if he doesn't talk about it with his teammates, right?
Oh, it's probably going around with the players. I don't know. We're just being allowed to go down in the field now for the first time. This coming homestand. Hallelujah. So I can actually introduce myself to some of the new players who've never even met me. And here we are a third of the way through the season. I think you just worry about what you have to do on the field and just in Pete's case, let your bat do the talking. And I think a lot of times, maybe it's a lesson learned. Some things best left unsaid. Let the union handle that stuff.
So another aspect of this, again, I want to talk to you about the substances thing in a second. Just by listening to Pete, you get a sense of how much distrust there is right now between the union and Major League Baseball. I mean, when you hear something like that, does it make you think just how likely a lockout is in the future?
I don't even want to think that far ahead. I mean, there's always been bad blood amongst ownership and the union. I think that you got to realize that there's egos involved here at the highest levels of management and on the union side. Tony Clark was very much criticized that he got kind of taken to the cleaners a little bit in the last negotiation. So he's going to be more hardline. I mean, he don't think that doesn't affect him and how he affects his negotiating because there's egos involved. So to me, you want to kill the golden goose, be my guest. It's a lot of money being made out there, both sides. And you want to go ahead and do that? Go ahead and do that.
Yeah, I just think these two sides, that negotiation last year could have been done, in good faith. Both sides could have relented and gotten something they were happier with. Instead, it just dug the divide even deeper. So I'm certainly not looking forward to that, but I'm hopeful. Okay, so Ronnie said in the booth the other day that he doesn't believe in the storyline that pitchers need this substance that's going around today just for control, that it's almost like a safety thing. And that's what a lot of pitchers say. Like, look, I don't want to hit anybody in April and May, so I use it. Ronnie said, no, that's a red herring. It's more about getting the ball to dance. And then so Pete says yesterday, a current player, no, I want them to use it. I want them to have control. Which side are you on of that argument?
I agree with Ronnie that they're using the substance. They've always used the substance, even in our day, to get a better grip and get better rotation and get better movement. That's all there is to it. It's a rule in the rule. It's in the rules that it's illegal. They should enforce it. But it's nonsense to think that it's because they're afraid they're going to hit someone. I will say this. Ronnie made a comment, and I didn't think of this. Get rid of the substances. Get rid of the body armor on the players. You see guys diving with no fear and not even moving their arm and taking it off that armor on their elbow. Doesn't hurt. They go to first base. What are they doing then? They're leaning in. They're making themselves more susceptible to getting hit in the head. So I'd never liked the body armor. You got to get rid of the body armor, and we'll see hitters how they stand in that box.
So the way you describe the pitchers of your generation doing something, whatever they were using, in that aspect, yes, it's been going on forever and it's commonplace. It's part of the game, right? But then you say it's illegal, the pitchers that are doing it today, which is also true. So if it's always been illegal, quote unquote, then how can Major League Baseball step in and actually change something if pitchers have been doing it all this time anyway?
Well, they can have the umpires and go out and check them. It's going to take more time. How about you're going to find out? If a hitter go check, a hitter can ask the umpire go check. Manager can, or coach on the bench, and they're going to have to go out now because just baseball's so reactionary. They're not proactive, seeing forward. They just react. So they're going to react to this. And we're going to have more delays. Games are going to be longer. Don Sutton, we all knew that Don had a razor blade. We get balls from Don Sutton, and they were razor blade cuts on that ball, on the thick part of the ball, on the panel. And it'd be like scalpel cuts. I
mean, it's fascinating to think that somebody had a razor blade on a field. And, we're talking about spider tack or sunscreen.
It wouldn't have been a double-edged razor. It would have been this one. It just would have been one side.
I'm just picturing. You're like, yeah, have the umpires go out, and if an umpire went out, Sutton could have, been like, don't come any closer.
We don't know where the hell it was because Don had all, like Gaylord Perry had all the gyrations, and he did so you couldn't, Gaylord somewhere he was loaded up,
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think it's interesting, Keith. I'm sure that you're going to be talking about it on the air during a game broadcast one of these nights because, we're going to be seeing some suspensions, I think, at some point, and this story is going to blow up. So I'm sure you and Gary will be talking about it. Let's quick back to the Mets and, David Peterson struggles continue. And look, 1, 2, and 3 in the Mets rotation are still great. I mean, Stroman, Walker, and DeGrom are still great. David Peterson is putting this team in a hole every time he pitches. 3 innings combined in his last 2 starts. Right. It's not good. And the last time we had you on the podcast, you said give him at least one more start. How do you feel now, Keith?
Well, now I'm concerned, obviously. He's lost his sinker. He can't throw a straight fastball. Excuse me. And I thought his last start, he was throwing more out here instead of on top. And that's a false safety for a pitcher. When they can't command, a good sharp breaking ball is always over the top, and unless they're sidearmers. But if they can't command it or can't get the sink coming here, they feel they can command it better by going 3/4 and drop the arm slot a little bit. They can command it better, but they lose velocity, they lose sharpness of the movement, and really it's much easier for a hitter to track both the fastball and the slider. So his slider has left him too, but he can't pitch straight. He's got to have that sinker, which he had last year. And that, to me, has been the reason why he's been getting hammered lately. And it is a concern now. And I read that Louis, what are you going to do? You got 33 games to the All-Star break? You got 33 games in 31 days? Where's the pitching depth? They've got to stay with him. He's going to be there.
Well, his future is important to the Mets' future. So
Agreed.
Isn't it potentially damaging, Keith, for a young pitcher if they keep him up because they have no other option and he just keeps getting bludgeoned each time out?
His confidence has got to be at a low right now. I mean, it's no fun when you're in a deep, deep slump, in my case, as an offensive player, or as a pitcher's case where you've gone out for 3 times and pretty much gotten beat up. And top it all off, he's a second-year man. So he's got to be shook a little bit. I agree with you. Athletes are fragile. I think that if the Mets weren't say in this thing or in front. Management wants to win. This group that came in here, it's the new group. They want to win. The front office, and they really want to win. And we're at the 1/3 mark, and we've got 30 wins. So that's 90-win season. And evidently they don't like, I guess, the two guys down in AAA. If they wanted to make a change, they can bring Eichhoff up. But I saw Louis' interview, and he said he's sticking with Peterson.
Yep.
So they're gonna run him out there, and they're just gonna have to ride their 1, 2, 3 starters. And it's really now, I think, what's as far as DeGrom's concerned, I think DeGrom is really having so far, obviously, his greatest year. But I think he's finally, they never got any runs for him. How many no decisions? He's finally getting wins, and he's getting big wins. And that's what your stopper is. Every 5th day you go out there and you know you're going to win that game. Keeps you out of long losing streaks. And it's always the guy that I can't tell you what it does for the offense. And I think this team is over, if there was anything mental where they couldn't score for him, they're starting to score for him now.
Yeah, that was a mental hurdle. And you know what? It helps, Keith, that the DH isn't there this year because he's hitting about 400. So that's certainly helped each time he pitches. You're listening to the Shea Anything Podcast, which is brought to you by Verizon. It's 5G built right for the Mets from the network more people rely on only on Verizon. All right, Keith, you mentioned it earlier. We're at the 1/3 mark of the season. What have you learned about the team from opening day to now, and how does that affect how you see their future going?
Well, I just think the bench has been the key to this, and the pitching, obviously. But from an offensive standpoint, the guys that have filled in have really done a terrific job. And all the little guys, the guys from AAA that are here now, that are filling in for Conforto, Nimmo,
McNeil.
McNeil's an infielder. Yes, that's true. So, but Peraza has been doing a great job. So you're able to have VR, Peraza, veterans, and they've done a terrific job. And I think what they did, and we said in spring training that they had everybody was talking about Lindor and Carrasco, and McCann, and under the radar screen was how they improved that bench. And even though the Guillorme is hurt, he's ready to come back. Everybody's kind of picked up, but the pitching has been the key. Obviously, there hasn't been the pressure on the offense where you go out there and go, we got to score 4 runs, because this team wasn't scoring 4 runs for first 2 months of the season. So VR and Peraza, to me, have just been stellar, really outstanding what the job that they've done. And the pitching has kept them in every game. And that's all that, they got 30 wins. They're 6 games over 500 on a 90 game pace. It's a long way to go. They're getting players back. You got to feel good about that. So we'll see how it shakes.
I feel like the story of the past month or so has been those replace Mets, as Jeff called them in our rundown today. But I feel like the story of the past week to 10 days, maybe even, Keith, has been how McCann, Alonso, Lindor, the guys that are healthy, Dom, the starters who have remained healthy, and Alonso's just gotten back to being healthy, have finally started performing the way that they were supposed to. And I have to imagine that has to be a big boost for a team who's been relying on Peraza and VR and Pilar and Brendan Drury and Billy McKinney to see the stars who are getting paid like it to start playing to the back of their baseball cards.
Well, I think Pete coming back had a big, took a big weight off the guy's shoulder. And Pete has stepped up and has become a big guy with the bat, getting big hits. He's driving in, getting, runs late to win ball games or put the Mets ahead. He's hitting with power. I think it took a lot of pressure off. I still don't feel Dom has gotten hot yet. I don't think Lindor's gotten hot yet. Okay, Lindor's walking, he's getting some hits, but he's not red hot yet. He hasn't had a red hot streak. Dom certainly has it. I'm waiting for those guys. Everybody has a hot streak, more than one in the season. I'm waiting for one of them or both of them together to get hot. So the main point is, with all the injuries, the maximum was 17 players on the IL at one point, and 16 for quite a long time for this team to be in first place. That says a lot about them. The fact that what impressed me too was they lost the first two in San Diego and they came back and won the back two. And who won the third game? It was DeGrom. And that's what he has to do. He stopped the bleeding. That could have been, okay, so we're playing against San Diego. They're supposed to be this great team, and we lose the first two. We got two more, and they came back and won the back two. That showed me something.
Yeah, that was an impressive series in San Diego. For a split, it doesn't get much better than that. All right, last thing, Keith, and I'm interested in this just because I've been watching every night since last year, and you're about to join Gary in the booth for the first time in quite some time. How different will that be? Being next to him as opposed to having a wall between the two of you.
Well, we'll be able to see each other. We look at each other when we do a broadcast. We just don't look into our monitors and on the field and never look at each other. And when we converse, we look at each other and it's a conversation. And our broadcast has always been very conversational, as if we're all sitting, the three of us are sitting on a couch in the living room watching the game. And it was very weird being separated, and Gary over in the other room, we had a mirror, but he was like this, couldn't see this expression on his face. So it really was, so it'll be more, I think it'll definitely be great.
You guys have, or I guess had, because you don't need it anymore, but like a hidden driveway mirror, right? Between the two.
Yes.
Did you ever realize?
We asked for that because we couldn't see each other. I mean, there was no mirror, so we got a partition between us, and it was just Ronnie and I, and Gary's over there with the statisticians. So we said, I got to at least have a look at it. It helped a little bit, but it wasn't that grand, because Gary, it was like looking at Gary was like looking through a microscope.
And now you'd think there's going to be even more, giggling, especially, once Ronnie gets back and the three of you back together. One of my favorite things about watching the three of you do a game is, to your point about it being conversational, it's also the times where it's like, wow, I haven't heard from anybody in a while, and all of you are just holding down your cough buttons because something has set you off from the truck, or something that one of you guys said. Next time you say snapping Tom, all three of you can snappy Tom. It's Keith. Excuse me for mixing it up. It was snappy tuna. Now it's snappy Tom.
Right.
They're the same thing, but also different. I don't know. Your terminology is your terminology.
It's baseball terminology that I've accumulated over my 20 something years on the field.
There you go.
20 plus years counting minor leagues.
Just a reminder to subscribe to the Shea Anything Podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever, and rate and review us as well. And also a reminder that the Shea Anything Podcast is brought to you by Verizon. It's 5G built right for the Mets from the network more people rely on, only on Verizon. Well, Keith, enjoy your return back to the booth and return back to sitting next to Gary in the same booth. And we will talk to you soon.
Okay, I'll be around. Got my flight this afternoon. I'll be in the booth tomorrow night.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.